One of the most interesting yet enigmatic figures in Elden Ring is the Gloam-Eyed or Dusk-Eyed Queen. She's only directly mentioned 4 times, but has a few more indirect references through the Godskin Apostles, Destined Death, and Black Flames. In this episode of Fear the Old Lore, we'll make an in-depth examination of the Gloam-Eyed Queen, comparing the English to the Japanese for more insight into her lore. Before we begin, please consider liking and subscribing, and if you like discussing lore, feel free to join the Discord server. The link is in the video description. I'd also like to give a special thank you to all my patrons and channel members. Your support makes it easier to continue working on these kinds of projects. Let's begin. Even though Gloam and Dusk are synonyms, I wouldn't blame anyone for thinking the Gloam and Dusk-Eyed Queens were different. They refer to the same character though, and as of patch 1.05, the singular reference to the Dusk-Eyed Queen and the Godslayer's greatsword was changed to Gloam-Eyed Queen to match the Japanese. According to the sword, the Gloam-Eyed Queen led the Godskin Apostles, and after her defeat by Malekith, the power of the Black Flame was sealed within it. Scouring Black Flame elaborates, saying when Malekith sealed Destined Death, the true power of the Black Flame was lost. If the Godskin Apostles set is correct in saying that they were once said to serve Destined Death, it might imply that the Gloam-Eyed Queen either was Destined Death, or she controlled it. But who was she? We don't have much in the way of answers. Black Flame Ritual says she was an Empyrean chosen by the Fingers, but this doesn't help narrow things down that much since the timeline of Elden Ring is so vague. But it does bring up some questions about just what exactly an Empyrean is. According to Gowry and the Remembrance of the Rock Goddess, Malenia and Miquella were born as Empyreans, which implies it can be hereditary. Yet Ranni and the Black Flame Ritual say Ranni and the Gloam-Eyed Queen were chosen by the Fingers, which would imply it isn't decided entirely by birthright. The Japanese for Empyrean is Shinjin, which can be literally broken down as God person or divine being amongst other things. While it's still discernible in English if you read between the lines a little, the Japanese for the Remembrance of the Rock Goddess is more direct and says Malenia and Miquella are the children of a single person god. Since Radagon and Marika are one, and Marika's a god, then Malenia and Miquella would be full-blooded god people, hence their status as Empyreans. If being an Empyrean is hereditary, it calls into question whether the Gloam-Eyed Queen has any relation to Queen Marika. But it should also be noted that her status as an Empyrean is also technically hearsay in Black Flame Ritual, since it uses "it is said" to describe her. However, there isn't much reason to doubt the description, and it's still possible the Gloam-Eyed Queen could be completely unrelated to Marika if it's the Two Fingers who select them. Perhaps one of the most troubling aspects of the Gloam-Eyed Queen is when she existed in the timeline. Ania and the Mending Rune of the Death Prince say the Golden Order was created by confining Destined Death, so the Gloam-Eyed Queen predates the Golden Order, but we don't know exactly when it was created. Black Flame Monk Amon Spirit Ashes say he was the first to betray the Fire Monks, and since they were formed after the war against the Giants to guard the Giants' flame, the Gloam-Eyed Queen was most likely active during the time of the Crucible, after the War of the Giants was over. This would align with how the Godskin Noble set says the most ancient apostles assimilated inhuman physiology, not unlike the Crucible, the Erd Tree in its primordial form. The time of the Crucible was known as the Age of Plenty, and it was once thought that the blessed sap of the Erd Tree would drip down from its boughs forever. But that Age of Plenty swiftly came to a close, and with time the Erd Tree became more an object of faith. The Erd Tree once flourished with abundance, yet it was only for a fleeting moment. Such is the course of all life. During the Age of the Crucible, death was a natural part of life, and the Erd Tree was no exception. Yet if death could be removed from life, then the age of the Erd Tree could be prolonged indefinitely, eternally. Knowing this, Marika used Malekith, her shadowbound beast given to her by the Two Fingers, to seal away the Rune of Death. With this, the Golden Order was created, and the Age of Plenty came to an end. The Grace of Gold was affected, and the red-tinged gold of the Crucible mentioned in Ordovis's greatsword, the Crucible Hornshield, and the Gilded Greatshield went away. This most likely coincides with the way the Black Flames lost their power, and how lightning lost its reddish hue that's still present in the Black Blades and Destined Death today. To me, the most likely time for this to happen would be on Radagon's return to Leyndell, when Godfrey was hounded from the lands between. While there's the possibility Radagon had already created the Golden Order to a degree before he met Rennala, I doubt it was truly complete since his Golden Order Greatsword was altered from the Greatsword Rennala gifted to him. Additionally, the lattice design of Radagon's seal and the impenetrable thorns of the Erd Tree seem to be inspired from the glintstone seals used by Raya Lucaria, where Radagon studied sorceries in an effort to be complete. Thus, while we don't have the exact time frame of when Destined Death was sealed, we can place it somewhere after the war against the Giants and before Radagon fully ascends to power. It's baffling more isn't said about such a pivotal moment in the timeline, especially since we're given so many accounts of the other disputes in Elden Ring's history. An Empyrean being sealed away should have been a major historic event, even more so if she was descended from Marika. Compared to Godwyn, the Gloam-Eyed Queen is a mere footnote in history, and it may be taken as evidence that she wasn't actually related to Marika. But to be fair, even Ranni was given the red-headed stepchild treatment even though she died with Godwyn. There are 5 major possibilities for the Gloam-Eyed Queen's identity with varying levels of plausibility, and I wouldn't be surprised if any of them became canonized or retconned with sequels or DLC. The first possibility is that the Gloam-Eyed Queen is the Godslayer's Greatsword. I know it sounds a little far-fetched at first, but a few details make it a surprisingly valid theory. According to its description, the black flames wielded by the Apostles are channeled from this sword. If black flames come from the Gloam-Eyed Queen, and they're channeled from her greatsword, it could very well imply that she's the sword. It doesn't make a ton of sense on its own, but if the Elden Beast can turn Radagon into the Sacred Relic Sword, who's to say something similar hasn't happened before? Others before me have pointed out the similarities between the design of the Sacred Relic Sword and the Fingerslayer Blade of Nokron, and with the Fingerslayer Blade rumored to have been born of a corpse, there may be a history of others being transformed into swords. Furthermore, the Godslayer's Greatsword is reminiscent of the Sacred Relic Blade, and its double helix design may be meant to evoke the imagery of life through a strand of DNA. However, if the Gloam-Eyed Queen became the Godslayer's Greatsword, it does call into question how Destined Death is bound into Malekith's sword, or why she wouldn't be Malekith's blade. The second possibility is that the Gloam-Eyed Queen is related to the Nox in the Eternal Cities. It's a bit of a stretch, but there may be a connection between them through the Albinauric mask. Though it's found in Volcano Manor, the mask says it's a malicious mockery that's a far cry from Godskin. It's a little strange the mask would bring up the Godskins at all, and it might imply the Godskins are a step further in the creation of the Albinaurics. If the Nox created the Godskins in addition to the Albinaurics, it might play into how they angered the Greater Will and were banished deep underground, potentially for trying to create a synthetic lord, but there's nothing to prove it one way or the other. The Nox are also tied indirectly to Flame through Raya Lucaria's Sword of Night and Flame. I don't want to get too off topic, so to make a long story short, the Carians may be descended from the Nox, and traces of the Nox influence can still be seen in things like the statues of a Nox Knight Maiden in the Church of Avowal. The Nox also have literal giants sitting on their thrones, which might suggest a connection to the Fire Giants, but this is tenuous since they lack eyes and faces in their chests like the Fire Giants found in the mountaintops. There's also a small chance the Black Moon of Noxtella could be related to the black obsidian gems found in the Godslayer's Greatsword or Malekith's Black Blade, but this is a pretty big stretch. Like Queen Marika, the Nox are said to be Numen, and in the unused quick descriptions for their armor set, the Nox are also said to be members of the Empyrean family. So if the Gloam-Eyed Queen had to be an Empyrean, there's a chance she came from the Nox. But again, there's nothing explicit, and even if the Nox did use fire and flames at one time, there's nothing to say those are the black flames of Destined Death. The third possibility may be the most popular, in that the Gloam-Eyed Queen might have been Melina. In the Forge of the Giants, she says the world is in need of repair and death indiscriminate, and her goal is to return Destined Death to the world. In the final cutscene of the Lord of Frenzied Flame ending, after Melina picks up Torrent's whistle, she turns to the camera and reveals her left eye is a deep gloomy purple, and her right eye has become grey, similar to the way those afflicted by Deathblight and Godwyn's eyes appear. Another surprising tie Melina has to Destined Death is that she uses the Blade of Calling when she's summoned to fight Morgott. Obviously, the Blade of Calling doesn't tie into Destined Death directly, but its Blade of Gold weapon art shares the same moveset as the Black Knife's Blade of Death. Both create flames and deal holy damage, so with Destined Death removed, perhaps gold is all that's left in the blade. Of course, this doesn't answer why it doesn't just use black flames instead, nor does the weapon art mean that it came specifically from Melina. If removing Destined Death is what led to the creation of the Golden Order, and the Gloam-Eyed Queen was active during the time of the Crucible, then it would follow that the shape of the Elden Ring changed when the Crucible was transformed into the Golden Order. When we visit Farum Azula to face Malekith the Black Blade, there's a depiction of the Elden Ring in what may be its proto or primordial form. It still resembles a tree with roots coming out of it, but beneath the engraving is a statue of a woman surrounded by 3 wolves. When Ranni gives the player the spirit-calling bell, she says it belonged to Torrent's former master along with the lone wolf Ashes. Ashes that harbored the spirits of 3 wolves. If Melina was Torrent's former master, then the wolves were presumably hers as well. It could be a coincidence that Melina had 3 wolves and the statue in Farum Azula does as well, but it is striking that all these coincidences seem to be pointing in the same direction. This next part of the video is going to be the most controversial, so I'd like to be clear this isn't something I necessarily believe in 100% myself, but it's been a thorn in my side for the past few months I couldn't ignore. Who exactly is Melina? If Melina is Marika's daughter, it wouldn't be surprising that she was an Empyrean, so her potentially being the Gloam-Eyed Queen isn't that much of a stretch. But it does bring up other questions. For instance, why doesn't Ranni list her as one of the Empyreans alongside Miquella and Malenia? It may be that Melina isn't technically a demigod. She may be a manifestation of Queen Marika herself. The fourth possibility for the identity of the Gloam-Eyed Queen is that it's none other than Queen Marika. I realize it's a tough pill to swallow, and it'll make me sound crazy for saying it, so I don't make this claim lightly. This theory has a few movable parts in that it's possible to interpret the Gloam-Eyed Queen as being Melina and Melina being Marika, but it's also possible to argue that it's just Marika who's the Gloam-Eyed Queen. One of my biggest concerns about the Gloam-Eyed Queen is that if the Rune of Death was part of the Elden Ring before it was sealed away, wouldn't it have been part of Marika since she's the vessel for it? Did Marika have to seal part of herself away to create the Golden Order? The answer is unironically, maybe. Just like the god-slaying Gloam-Eyed Queen, Marika's goal is to slay a god, the Elden Beast. We don't know who exactly the Godskins originally hunted, but the quick descriptions for their set say their clothing came from tanned demigod skin, suggesting they hunted demigods, perhaps the soulless ones we can find in wandering mausoleums. I know this is a stretch, but Malekith may have hunted these demigods alongside the Godskins, as multiple beast incantations say Gerank's former name meant death of the demigods, yet we don't have any mention of him hunting the ones we know. It's frustrating we don't have more information about the demigods, especially when Aeneas says the demigods are each and all the direct offspring of Queen Marika. Was she just talking about the ones who claimed the Great Runes, or was she literally saying all demigods? If it's all demigods, then it would confirm Marika had other children we don't know about, and it would fall in line with the ghost dialogue at the Church of Pilgrimage, who says a wandering mausoleum cradles Marika's unwanted child. If she has unwanted children we don't know about, perhaps she was the one to cradle the Godskin Apostles in their swaddling cloth. Even if Marika isn't the Gloam-Eyed Queen, the line about her having unwanted children is still unsettling. Just like the Gloam-Eyed Queen, Malekith's remembrance confirms Marika was an Empyrean, stating, Malekith was a shadowbound beast given to his Empyrean. Marika's sole need of her shadow was a vessel to lock away Destined Death. Even then, she betrayed him. We don't know exactly how Marika betrayed him, but if it involved unsealing Destined Death, it could mean Marika was complicit in the Night of the Black Knives. According to the Black Knife set, the assassins were all women and rumored to be Newmen who had close ties with Marika herself. And with the Newman's runes saying they're in fact of the same stock as Queen Marika herself, there may be reason to suspect that Marika is of the Nox, if not their queen. Again, I realize how tiresome these kinds of theories can be, so take the following with a heavy grain of salt. While the Nox come from the Eternal Cities, One aspect of Marika's character that stood out to me is that she's called Marika the Eternal, or Queen Eternal. I don't want to get too into the linguistics of it because it's still vague in Japanese, but it might be possible to interpret her title as Eternal Queen or Queen of the Eternals. Not all references to the Eternal or Eternity are references to the Nox though, so it's difficult making any kind of definitive statement about it. Anyway, while the placement of enemies is a bit iffy at times, the Nox may have been responsible for the creation of the valiant gargoyles that can be found throughout Leyndell and serve as Malekith's Blackblade kindred. 2 guard the entrance to Nokron, and there are a large number of abandoned ones in the nameless Eternal City and Deeproot Depths. It's possible they were servants of Marika and Malekith first, but it is a little odd just how many are underground. With the Nox creating special drafts to make puppets and silver tears to create mimics, it wouldn't surprise me if the valiant gargoyles are one of their creations, especially since the gargoyles have 2 faces. They might have been experimenting with 2 beings inhabiting the same body, and might tie into the dichotomy between Marika and Radagon. The Eternal Cities may have had stronger ties to the royal family at one point, since even Godwyn is buried in one, but it's also possible his body was shifted during the Shattering. On the other hand, the Wandering Mausoleums, which are said to house Marika's unwanted children, use Nox architecture, and their chests can also be found in the Eternal Cities. I don't think this is particularly convincing evidence that Marika was the Queen of the Nox, but it's something I couldn't ignore. As for Melina, I realize she calls Marika her mother a few times, but there's reason to doubt what she says. I don't think she's lying per se, but with her loss of memory, I don't think she has the full story. In her dialogue about Bach, she says the following.
Your seamster, Bok. I see him crying. From time to time. I think he misses his mother. He wants someone to tell him he's beautiful. Does being born of a mother mean one behaves in such a manner?
This makes it sound as though she doesn't know what it's like to be born of a mother, and so while she might be Marika's daughter, it may be only in a metaphorical sense. One thing I've heard the lore community mention a few times is that Melina is called Marika's daughter in the internal files, so there shouldn't be any questions about their relationship. This is only half true. When I was trying to look up the internal file names for myself, I came across some very interesting tweets by Sinka or Noof834. While Melina is called Marika of Daughter in English in the closed network test files, her Japanese name is Musume Marika. The issue with this is that the kanji for daughter is used as a prefix and would make it more akin to Lady Marika. If it really Marika's daughter, her name would be closer to Marika no Musume or Marikako. I'm not sure where the closed network test datamine names came from, but it seems there's a high likelihood they were machine translated, hence the misleading information. If it weren't for this, I don't think I would have entertained the idea that Melina could be Marika, but there is a surprising amount of merit to it. When we visit various sites around the world, Melina will offer to recite the spoken echoes of Queen Marika and reveal something about her. This may seem a little bizarre at first, and make it sound like Melina has more intimate knowledge about what Marika said and done. However, in Japan, there's a concept where words can take on a spirit of their own and become physically manifested in the world, and it's called kotodama. While I'd like to say that Melina is recalling her memories as Queen Marika, there's an added layer of ambiguity in that she really could just be reciting the echoes of Queen Marika's spoken words. There are a few other peculiarities though. If Melina is summoned during the fight with Morgott, she's able to use a spell unseen anywhere else in the game. Unlike Blessing's Boon or Blessing of the Erd Tree, Melina actually summons a manifestation of the Erd Tree that can heal herself and nearby allies, and she can even cast it upon her death. This may not mean much on its own, but it does show she has a deeper connection to the Erd Tree than many other characters. When taken in conjunction with her ability to send the player to the Round Table Hold, and the Round Table Hold's connection to the Erd Tree, it might suggest all 3 are linked. I don't want to talk about the Round Table Hold too much because it's a bit of a mess and it's off topic, but I have wondered if the one we visit is located metaphysically within the Erd Tree, since it houses the largest site of grace, is disconnected from the physical roundtable hold we can visit in Lindell, and it burns with the Erd Tree. While I don't think Hugh can be directly connected to Melina, I've wondered if the sheer terror of her he mentions could be equated to the way Melina promises to deliver death to the player character in the Frenzied Flame ending. It would also be nice to be able to connect the spirit tuner Hugh knew to Marika or Melina, particularly since Melina may have owned the spirit calling bell, but unfortunately neither are shown with the same hue in their eyes as Roderica. It might also be too reductive to assume the spirit tuner he knew was Marika, since he doesn't talk about anyone else during his conversations. Aside from that, I've wondered if the way Melina allows the player to turn the power of runes into their strength is meant to parallel the way Marika was said to personally bestow the blessings of the Erd Tree. It's also strange that of all Marika's children, Melina was the only one to have inherited Marika's will, and when Melina does decide what path to follow, it coincides with the one her mother set for her.
There is something I'd like to say. My purpose was given to me by my mother, but now I act of my own volition. I have set my heart upon the world that I would have, regardless of my mother's designs. I won't allow anyone to speak ill of that, not even you.
One fascinating theory is that Melina might be to Marika what Millicent is to Melania. In Cinca's tweet about Melina being Marika of Daughter, they theorize that Melina may be trying to return Marika's lost mission to her in the same way Millicent wants to return Melania her will. I don't know how I feel about this idea, but I thought it was definitely worth sharing. The last comparison I'll make between Marika and Melina is that they both seem to be missing the same eye, at least while Marika's still alive, and they could be meant to parallel each other. Of course, one could also argue that they should be missing opposite eyes if they're the same person. We also don't know for sure whether it's Marika's passing that causes Melina to change or if there's another reason for it. I really wish we could have seen Melina again if we purged the Frenzied Flame, as it's a really big missed opportunity, but we'll just have to make do with what we have. The fifth possibility for the Gloam-Eyed Queen is that she is another character entirely. I know Ranni is another popular choice, but I find it just as likely that FromSoft could add in a completely new character in a sequel or DLC to be the Gloam-Eyed Queen, and I wouldn't be surprised if it's never expanded upon at all. There's a history of characters being introduced into FromSoft games that retcon things, like Maria retconning the doll being based upon Queen Annalise in Bloodborne, or taking things in a completely different direction like with Gale and Filianor in the DLC of Dark Souls 3. As I mentioned before, these theories can be taken independently, and some can be combined, so it's possible that the Gloam-Eyed Queen is Marika, who is also Queen of the Nox, yet separate from Melina, and vice versa. There's a lot of circumstantial evidence that tends to point in one direction, but none of it is ever really definitive. I try to be as precise and meticulous as I can on this channel, so it's a bit out of my comfort zone releasing a video that's so heavily based on speculation, and even now I'm not sure about my final thoughts on the matter. The idea that Marika could be all of these things is really compelling, but I also don't like it because it feels too reductive, too convenient, and it leaves too many critical questions unanswered, like how the duality between Marika and Radagon is supposed to work. Ranni's lines about how she discarded her Empyrean flesh because she refused to be controlled by the Two Fingers makes me wonder if she meant it literally, that the Two Fingers could control her body, like a puppet. If so, then perhaps Marika is being controlled by the Two Fingers through Radagon. Maybe Malekith had a part in it. After all, how would Iji know that Blythe would become a curse upon Ranni unless it happened before? But I digress. I'm not sure I'll ever really have a strong opinion on the matter, so I'm curious to hear your guys' thoughts. Does it still sound crazy that the Gloam-Eyed Queen could be a sword, or Marika, Melina, the Queen of the Nox, or any combination of the three? Or is it more likely she's someone else? Let me know in the comment section or in the Discord server. Until next time, fear the old lore.